So, hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. I'm really excited that we have this opportunity to share today and just have a very informal conversation. Welcome to Flip the Script. This is a by us and for us roundtable discussion to really save Black and Brown lives from dying of COVID-19. So thank you all for being a part of this very necessary effort, in my opinion. I am Cheryl Hargrove Howard. I'm the executive producer and moderator of today's roundtable. My co-moderator is someone most, if not all of you know and are familiar with. Please welcome South Florida's own James T. Thomas of Hot 105.
Well, thank you very much, Cheryl Hargrove Howard. Everybody, thank you. And I'm honored to be a part of this. Cheryl, I must start this by saying I am going to become a new member of the group, The Impressions.
Okay.
Well, they had a song out that said, "I'm so proud of you." And now that goes to what your hubby said prior to our coming live. So we are very proud of what you're doing and for all the beautiful people who have joined us and who were supporting you. And I'm honored that I was invited to be a part. So I am here to learn, as I hope many of us will by listening to some of the experts there.
Okay, thank you, James. And don't make me cry before this is all over. Thank you so much. You know that means the world to me. And I'll just share with people briefly that.
Don't.
But I'm really just grateful because you're a reflection of community and what that really means about it taking a village. And I think this is an extension of a village today. I'm just appreciative to all of you for being here and contributing and lending your voice and your expertise. And I look forward to seeing how this plays out. So I'm going to roll up the sleeves.
Let's get this party started.
Get the party started. So I'm going to ask, and she knows she's up. So I would like to tell you that this person that we're introducing first has started as my physician, but she has become, like some of the others on this call, a sister by choice. And when I tell you I trust my literal life in her hands and have, I am really honored that you have put in so much work to ensure that this happens today. I'd like to introduce you to Dr. Linda Green, OBGYN, and the proprietor and principal of OBGYN and Associates, as well as Green Med Spa. Please take the mic from here.
Good evening, one and all. Really, this inspiration came from the wonderful Cheryl Hargrove Howard, trying to advocate for our community, being very disturbed by the lack of information that we have had, at the trust that is really not been given to the medical community by our Black and Brown communities, and just trying to increase that trust that, we all need to have in the information that we're given. Of course, we can go through a litany of history that has not allowed us to be instilled with that trust. And we just want to try to address it now that we have had some strides in being represented, not as much as it should be as far as being medical practitioners, but more than we have ever in the past. So, we've tried to gather medical practitioners so that we could give valid information that would perhaps be a little more trusted than it would be if it came from the mouths of others. And that's really a very simple, I'd say instead of fireside, beachside chat, here we are in South Florida, that we would like to have. Having said that, I don't want to use up much time. I would love to give our practitioners that are on the call just an opportunity to say what their specialty is, where their practice is, so that if our participants would like to reach out to them, that they would know where to find them, and so that they understand that they really are part of their community in many ways. Sherry, I don't know if you want to just go ahead and unmute or do it in order, so it'll be in a fashion that's ordered.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Green. I'll first call up, based on my screen, Dr. McKenzie, Dr. Carol McKenzie, if you can tell us your specialty and where you're located.
I'm GYN now, and I work with Dr. Linda Green in her fantastic, wonderful office in Med Spa. And every day I try my best to convince those patients that are still on the fence that it's time to get off the fence and do something, because the only thing you're going to get on the fence is COVID. And I am still here, alive and well, and practicing and doing my best to give confidence to those that are still a little bit nervous. But I haven't figured out the magic words so far.
That's what we're here. Maybe together we all come up with the magic. This may be the magic room, huh?
Here's hoping, because Dr. McKenzie, one of the things that I find on radio when people are calling in is that those people who are on the fence, they're not participating in the conversations. They won't say why they're on the fence. And with all the misinformation that those of us who know that we want to not only protect ourselves, but protect everyone else by getting the vaccine, reaching them, whether they're on the fence or whether they're on the ground, I'm wondering, what can we do? Is it possible that these people do not watch the news, or they're just not being informed? And I'm wondering, because so many of the churches have been closed to people attending, and many people, yes, they do watch it virtually, but many are not. Is that where we're missing it? Are they not really getting the information necessary to say that there's a variant out there that could really take us back to where we started?
Yes, we are definitely going to try and hopefully come up with something that we can all walk away from this room with, to share with those of our loved ones, our friends, our colleagues that may be hesitant or on the fence today. Hopefully there will be a nugget in this room that connects to each and every one of us, that may connect to those of us that did not join us today. I'm going to go back through the room and introduce the other physicians. If you can just give us your name, your specialty, and where you're located. And once we go through all of that, we will start with our first two questions. Next on my screen is Dr. Erica Dudley, fellow Rattler, C. Reich.
Yes, hello, my name is Dr. Erica Dudley. I work for the Veterans Affairs Healthcare System. So I work for the VA, and I currently work for the Clinical Resource Hub in Pittsburgh, VA, providing services in Vision 8, so the Pennsylvania, Delaware area.
And what is your area of practice, your specialty?
Oh, I'm a psychiatrist, sorry.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dudley. We'll be hearing from her soon. And even though this is not a practicing physician, I want to call him up because, and yes, you're about to be put on the spot, because I'm aware as of today that he works for blackdoctors.org. And I know you have another call at 7 p.m., but I'd love for you to share the work that you've been doing, because as much as this is our grassroots effort, you also have a grassroots effort, and you're a fellow Rattler and friend of many, many, many years.
Good evening, everybody. And I think when I talked to Cheryl earlier today, I think this is as important or even more important than what we do at Black Doctor, because what we do at Black Doctor is on a large scale. We've had a lot of very, very famous people, but what's important is we've got to get people vaccinated at the local level, and you've got to talk to people that you know. You've got to talk to your OB. You've got to talk to people that you can respect. And sometimes talking to Dr. Nunez Smith or Dr. Fauci, that's great. And seeing those programs are great, but it's most important to talk to people that you trust, that are going to give you valued information about the vaccines and the virus. And that's going to sway more opinion. We've done polling on our site, and that's really what sways opinion. It's about taking care of friends, it's about taking care of family, and it's about listening to trusted sources. And so this is so very important to have these type of forums, to continue these conversations amongst people that are like-minded, amongst people that are connected in some way, to have these conversations and to share those conversations with their kind of extended family community. And so I'm here. I know I hate that I have to leave, but I got another show I got to host tonight about the vaccine. We're just focusing on North Carolina, South Carolina tonight. So again, continue to speak out, continue to speak up, continue to be advocates for people getting vaccinated, for our community, for our health. I'm looking at the numbers are not good with regards to Black people being vaccinated. And as we all know on this call, it affects us at a much higher rate. And we have much harsher effects when we do catch COVID. And so it's very, very important. These forums are important. So I just thank you. I'm blessed to be a part of it.
Thank you so much. And thanks for sharing your experience with us. And we hope to see you again in future dates. If I haven't called you up and let us know about, I see Dr. Rondon, if you will unmute your mic, tell us what your specialty is and where you're located.
Okay. Well, first, thank you for having me here. That's actually an honor to be in the call, more than a duty. I am board certified in internal medicine. I am certified principal investigator and clinical research, and I'm a hospice medical director, as well as primary practice.
Thank you.
Tell us where you practice, Dr. Rondon.
Broward and Dade County, mainly Dade County for the research, and Broward County for primary care, internal medicine, and hospice care.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rondon. James.
Yes.
And again, any of the specialists, you may jump in and interrupt us at any time, but this roundtable is by and for communities of color. Like we've already said, we are really dying of COVID-19 at rates that far exceed those of our white, non-Hispanic community members. So we're here to flip the script. We want to change the approach. James, as you would say to me all the time, you meet people where they are. And in this case, our panelists, our community members agree with the mission that we must save our lives. And there are many approaches to this. We come here this evening to show transparency. We all come here this evening to do the same.
Okay. Well, let's get to that first question, because I think that this question is one that even those who have gotten the vaccine, such as ourselves, wants to know about the effectiveness of the vaccine. How long will it last? Will we have to get a booster? But the fact is, let's see if we can get any of our doctors to respond. Not so much as to whether they should. I think everyone here agrees that we should get the vaccine. But for those who have concern about its effectiveness, how long it'll last, and if they will need a booster, can anyone speak to that?
Let me speak about that. I would like to say that this is a very new and novel disease that we're dealing with. Everybody's concerned about the speed that the vaccine was approved. That's the major order when patients and the general population decide whether or not to get the vaccine. Everybody's complaining is like the government is trying to give us a medication that they haven't tested well, and there is a new medication they want to use as a guinea pig, and that's the main complaint, including, I have to say, physicians. Some of my colleagues have said that they're not going to get the vaccine because they are not sure. And if we look at the history of clinical research and clinical trial in our country, I mean, the reputation based on the Tuskegee and other example of mistrust of people toward the government, that's a logical reaction. But this disease is here to stay, and we have to be cognizant of that. I mean, the vaccine has to be proven, and I'm pretty much involved in clinical research. And the FDA only requests to be more than 50% effective. So if the vaccine, the Pfizer and the vaccine from Moderna, when they apply for emergency approval, the FDA only required them to be 50% effective, but almost 100% safe, which means that, as we all know, that the vaccine trial has been stopped and halted many times because concern about safety. For example, J&J, there was a concern about thrombosis, and the FDA hold the vaccination and put the A&J on the review, and the same with Pfizer, AstraZeneca in Europe. So it's very important to deliver the population that while we understand their concern, is this vaccination, especially the Pfizer and Moderna, which is that more available as long as the J&J, they are safe. They are safe and they are very effective. Pfizer 95%, Moderna 94%, and the one that is going to apply for emergency approval, which is the one for Novavax, is also around 90%. J&J has the advantage of being only one dose. And as you mentioned, we don't know if we have to get a booster because we don't know how long the immunity is going to last, especially in the vaccinated people and in people who already have the disease and are immune naturally. So this is a pretty new for us. 22 is going to be a year to determine whether it's going to be a need for the booster or those variants now, like the Delta and other variants that are coming up in the United States. We don't know exactly how effective the vaccination is going to be, even though Pfizer, Moderna, and the Novavax have said that they cover the new variants.
One thing that he said that I don't know if I've heard anyone say, and that is COVID is here to stay. Now, and I think if people realize if what the doctor is saying is true, if we realize that this virus is here to stay and it's mutating, and all of this, I think all of us has to be concerned about family, neighbors, and what we are going to do should this thing spike again.
Yeah, I just want to add one quick thing to that. And I think what we have found is we have to accept that people have hesitancy and fears. And I think sometimes we go too far in trying to intellectualize it to people. And we have to be, transparent and a little bit more emotional about it. And so what I have found in the events that I've hosted is I've talked about my own apprehension when I went in. And I've been preaching vaccine, go get your vaccine. But then when it was time for me to go get vaccinated, I still felt that hesitancy. I still felt that nervousness. I still felt that trepidation going in there because of the unknown. But my concern and care for the community was bigger and stronger than my fear of what the vaccine could bring. We have to talk about that. We have to share those experiences. We can't just data dump to death on people. We have to talk to them and treat them as really, understanding their fear and lean into that. Because I think the more we can do that, the more we can relate to people, the better chance we have of getting them to move from hesitancy to getting vaccinated. And that one more person getting vaccinated is one more step to getting us to herd immunity. So we've got to lean into it.
But one of the things that I will lean into, if today we leave here saying that this virus is here to stay, I think if people knew that, and if that was said enough, people would think twice or more to saying, hey, if it's here to stay, and I might be able to get it. And I always say that if you don't think that God will get your attention by doing something to yourself, think about him getting your attention to someone you love, and think about what he allowed to happen to his only son. Cheryl, I'm going to stop preaching and you can.
I'm agreeing with you, James. That was a very humbling statement Dr. Rondon made, that it is here to stay. And I'm agreeing with you and Ellis that we really have to connect and really have to share our stories. This is the type of experience that drives me to want to be on this call today. We have to change this story. And those of the physicians that are on this call today, they speak our language. We are of the same cultures. Blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans are dying at 2.3, and 2.4 times the rate of our white non-Hispanic counterparts. And we have to do something. And this is our one thing. I'll stop talking, and someone who has their hand raised.
No, I just want to add what you said, that, there is a reason why some patients or the general population are scared. There's a history of discrimination. There is a history of abuse on clinical research. I mentioned the Tuskegee experiment. And that's why the minorities are scared, to participate in clinical research. One of the things that the FDA did with this trial of vaccine, they require to be inclusive, which means that they require a certain number of minorities to participate in the clinical research because they want to have a sample of the population. And we have to understand, I mean, for example, the Pfizer vaccine, 40,000 subjects participate in that one, about 30,000 on the Moderna. But now we have the massive, the vaccine in the general population, of course, that is different from clinical research because, there are different ethnic background, genetics in different people. But we have to actually convince the general population that we need to get the herd immunity. We need to get people vaccinated. We have proven that isolation alone doesn't work. You quarantine people, and once you let it go out, they're going to get contaminated. So we have to educate the population to follow the social distancing, the wearing of the mask. And I don't know if any of my colleagues and most people have noticed that the influenza, which last year, but around this time, it was like 400,000 people infected with that. Now it's only about 1,000 in the whole season. So masks have prevented the spread of respiratory diseases. And there is also an anti-vaccine movement out there that, they come out with a conspiracy theory about the vaccine being the government putting chips in our body. So we as a physician, as a practitioner, science people, we have to convince the general population that it's not funded to be thinking like that.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rondo. We have another hand up. Adam Howard, I see your hand is up.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, so my question is in response to what was said earlier about COVID being here to stay. So I want to analogize that to smallpox. Now, smallpox was once an epidemic, but was eventually eradicated. So my question is that if we get, let's just say theoretically, we get almost the entire population vaccinated, isn't it possible to eradicate COVID also?
Can I answer to that? Well, there are two differences in that diseases. First, both of them share that there were zoonotics at the beginning. Remember, COVID is theorized that it was coming from bats and animals to humans. That's what we want to prove, that the vaccine achieve a herd immunity, so the virus run out of us. Meaning that if that's what happened with the smallpox, it was a mass vaccination. And remember, the difference between the smallpox and COVID is that the smallpox was 90% lethal, which means that either you get vaccinated and immune or you die while you have the disease. So when you have a disease that is very lethal, as a natural history, tend to disappear for lack of host. So the combination of being almost 50% lethal and the fact that most people got vaccinated with the smallpox helped to eradicate the smallpox. The COVID is a novel disease, so we have to see in our coming year what is going to happen with the herd immunity. We're not even close. We're not even close to herd immunity. There are most people who doesn't want to get vaccinated. So, and the isolation. There are people who have been quarantined, so they don't get the disease. So you only have two ways to get immune. One is natural, getting the disease and hopefully not die. And the second one is getting vaccinated. So that's what I told my patient. You are afraid of the vaccine. What about getting the disease? I mean, what about if you are a vulnerable population, you are elder, you are sick, and you get the COVID? What is going to happen then? And compare with if you get the vaccine and you may have some side effects. That's possible with any medication.
Well, any other questions? Anyone with questions or comments to what was just asked?
I'd just like to reiterate what was said, what the doctor said. It is 90, the vaccines, the Moderna, the Pfizer, and the Johnson & Johnson, they're 95% effective against the COVID vaccine. When you're non-vaccinated, you're 0%. So those are just odds. So just think about it as facts. 95% versus 0% unvaccinated. And like you said, and like Dr. Dean said, and what you said, Cheryl, we have to share our stories. In addition to sharing our stories, we have to listen to their stories because people have questions. They are afraid. And as Dr. Dean was saying, they're afraid for a reason and good reasons, like you pointed out about the history of experience. So we need to listen to what what their concerns are. Because they just have questions. They're hesitant because there is fear. And this is where we can come in, like you said, because we understand where that fear is coming from. We know that history of that fear, and we can speak to it in a way that others cannot. And as Dr. Dean was saying, you just, can't say, well, you just need to get it. And this, you need to listen and empathize, because how it's so painful for you to read a book about something in the past, they are living it now. So we just, like Dr. Dean was saying, we need to be very empathetic about what they're going through. And just speaking to like the question on the side that I see from Ms. Thomas, that the vaccine may mutate within the host. There's been no science about the vaccine mutating within you. The COVID virus mutates. There's no science that I have read about the vaccine that you receive mutating within your body. So there's a lot of misinformation out there that people are getting a hold of, and they're trying to it's so hard to make a decision where you have so much information coming to you from different directions. So I think this should be like Dr. Dean and you said, develop a safe place for people to come and ask those questions. No question is, that's just way out there. No, any question you have is a valid question, because that is what's causing you to pause and making a decision of what you're going to do for your health.
Dr. Dudley, while what you have just said is fresh, I'd like to get a little clarification on something. I've heard that the vaccines are 100% effective against death. So could you clarify for us, please, when we hear 95% efficacy rate, 75% efficacy rate, and yet it's 100% effective against death? I mean, what exactly does that mean? Are we just talking about death and being put in the hospital? Because this might be the reason why some of us who are already vaccinated might be possibly more cavalier than we need to be, not realizing that we might still be able to get it and pass it on. So I'd like you to clarify that.
So again, I'm psychiatry, but based on the information I have, 95%. So I can't say that anything, I wouldn't be comfortable saying you're 100% not going to die, but the vaccine protects your body against the virus, meaning it boosts up your immune system. So when your body comes in contact with that virus, it can send out the attack dogs. So when you get the vaccine, your body's full of attack dogs that are going after the COVID virus, right? So if you have 100 attack dogs going after the virus, you have a good chance that virus is not getting to you. Not saying, and so yes, in that respect, the chances of dying once you have a COVID vaccine will be much lower, closer to 100%. I would say yes, closer to 100%. I wouldn't be comfortable as a scientist saying anything's 100%, but yes, closer to 100%. Think about it. When you get the vaccinations, and another thing about vaccinations, all of you here have vaccinations. You've been getting vaccinations since the time shortly after you were born, all throughout time. And I remember in 2010 with the flu virus that the swine flu, that the children were getting vaccinations at the daycare. So this is nothing new. The only thing new is that the misinformation that's going out there, sparking fear and concerns and confusion, and that can be paralyzing to people. So being 95% effective, meaning that, it's a scientific term, and maybe somebody else who's better at statistics than I was can explain it as well, is that, again, like out of 100 chances of you getting something, 95% of the time, 95 times you'll be good. There's a 5% chance that you could. Should you be out cavalier in the middle of a club with people unvaccinated? I personally wouldn't do it, even though I'm vaccinated. But it is about still being wise. 95 is not 100. 95 still not 100. It's 95%. But again, not vaccinated is 0%.
Before we go to Mr. Dean, can I just say this? Because I think that although we may not get ill being vaccinated, I have heard it saying that we could become asymptomatic even being vaccinated. Now, and I see, so Mr. Dean, will you respond to that? Because I see you nodding your head.
Yeah, so a couple of things that I've heard real quick. As one, the vaccines are not giving you COVID, right? That's not how it's working. What they've done is they've taken the crown, that spike that you see on the ball, taken the crown, and they've duplicated it. And so they put it, it's an mRNA, and it's a messenger RNA that allows to deliver that crown to your cells and allows your cells to be able to determine, hey, this is a foreign substance. We're going to create some antibodies to recognize this and attack it. So I saw the question about why do you have a response more on the second vaccine than the first one? Well, the first one is just your body seeing it, creating antibodies. When you get that booster shot, it sees it again, and what is called an immune response happens. And that's why people are reporting getting sick on the second one or feeling ill, getting headaches and soreness, because your immune system is turning on. That's actually a good thing to have that response. So people that don't have a response, don't panic. But if you have a response, that's also good because your immune system is kicking in, and that's individually defined. So it's not a universal decision on that. The second thing I would say is absolutely, it is, you can still get COVID if you're vaccinated. You might not feel it. And that's the part why we're pushing so hard on these forums that we have to get people vaccinated, because if I'm vaccinated and I come in contact with somebody with COVID, I might not feel any symptoms, but I can still spread it to somebody that is not vaccinated, and I can cause them to get all of those symptoms that is coming from the having the virus in their body. And so as vaccinated people, we still have to be careful when we're out in public, because we're still 95% covered, but others aren't. And so that's why I still wear my mask, even though I live in Georgia and people are out there free willy, and I look crazy because I'm the only person sometimes in the place with a mask on. I still do it as a sign to show people that I'm concerned about them and community, even though I'm vaccinated. So it's very, very important that we have those distinctions and understanding that we're really just telling our bodies. It's like getting a cheat sheet for a test. That's the easiest way to describe it, is when you get that vaccine, your body is getting a cheat sheet. So when that test comes, if it comes, you're already prepared for it. And that's why there is a low to zero death rate when it comes to contracting COVID when you've been vaccinated.
Thank you so much for sharing. I'm really appreciative to all of you that have come into this room and have opened yourselves up with truth and transparency. We do have, I see 5 raised hands. I see Mahalia Watson's hand up, and then Cal, and then Juliet. Mahalia, please ask your question.
Hi, thank you so much. I have a couple of questions, if that's okay. I just wanted to, refer to what Mr. Dean said about immunity. I was just watching a story on the news that said, the U.S. won't reach their goal of 70% of the population vaccinated by July 4th. And the main reason for that is young people mostly are not getting vaccinated. And I saw an interview with a young man that said, I've already had COVID, so I have antibodies, so I don't need to get the vaccine. Can you respond to that? Any other doctors?
Yes. So there are some concerns that people that have survived COVID will have to start reporting it as a pre-existing condition. So think about what that means about it when you're talking about getting life insurance, when you're getting medical insurance, all of the ramifications that come with having a pre-existing conditions. There's also something called long haulers that's still being studied. So while people are concerned about the long-term effects of the vaccine, there is just equal evidence and even more evidence on the other side that there's more effect of having COVID and surviving COVID and more deleterious effects on the body by having survived COVID. Because I know initially it was considered a respiratory illness, but it's now being considered as a vascular illness. And so that has more effect on other systems of the body. We're talking about potentially people having brain fog, still having migraines. We're talking about affecting enlargement of the heart. We're talking about affecting the kidneys, your everything that your blood vessels touch. If you've got COVID, that could be a part of it. So when we're thinking about setting life insurance, and we're talking about shortening your lifespan, right? Potentially having even survived COVID, we're talking about a long-term effect. And so people cannot take that lightly and just be like, well, I survived it, I've got antibodies. Finally, the research is showing that the people that have survived COVID, their antibodies don't last as long as people that have been vaccinated because we get a booster shot as well. And so we build a stronger immune response when we are vaccinated than we do is when we have caught COVID and survived it. So it's more advantageous to go ahead and get vaccinated than it is to fight your way through COVID and hope that those antibodies survive and protect you going forward.
Okay, so they have antibodies. Yes, they do.
Yes.
However, the antibodies don't last as long, and the response is not as strong as that of the vaccine. Is that the answer to that question?
Yeah, that's the short. That's the summary of it. So yeah, so it's not lasting as long as the vaccine, and that because your body's just building antibodies to fight the virus. It's not building up the antibodies ahead of time. So like now your body, when you have the vaccine, you're prepared before you get infected. Because when you build up antibodies after you're infected, you're already behind. Because the virus is replicating in your body and your body's trying to build antibodies to fight the virus. So you're building just enough to fight it. And once it's fought, then it stops. Whereas with the vaccine, you're building up a reservoir of antibodies before you get infected. And so therefore, once your body recognizes, hey, I've got a virus in me, you've already got a reservoir of antibodies, it attacks it. And that's why you could be asymptomatic. And that's why it doesn't last as long if you're vaccinated, because you've already built it up ahead of time. It's like building an army before the war.
Okay, thank you so much. And a good friend of mine who I saw the other day said, I'm not vaccinated. I'm still waiting to see what happens to people who get vaccinated. He said to me something last night. It was a video of it looked like a member of Congress saying that, we shouldn't demonize people who don't want to get vaccinated, who haven't been vaccinated. That's their choice. And, that's fine. One thing he said was that there has been over 3,000 people who have died after getting the COVID vaccine. And that sounded kind of, off to me. I was just wondering, is that true? Is that a stat that people have been dying after getting the COVID vaccine? Like, this was a member of Congress saying this. So I was like, that's very odd. So do you know?
I see Dr. Dean as well. So I can say, this is Dr. Detley, I can say that no, from in the same, I have not read of 3,000 people dying status post the COVID vaccine. But even if that were true, there have been how many hundreds of thousands of people who died from COVID. So with any choice you're going to have to make, it's going to be a risk benefits. So what are a risk assessment? What are my risks? What am I risking, riding down the street without a helmet on at top speed, in and out of traffic in Miami? Like, you have to do a risk assessment for yourself. So no, I have not heard that in the scientific data that 3,000 people have died from the COVID vaccine. But I have heard of the hundreds of millions, and I don't know the exact numbers. So the hundreds of thousands who died from COVID.
Okay. And the last thing is, what about folks who get vaccinated but don't develop antibodies?
So I have not heard of anything in the literature about people who've been vaccinated with the and not develop antibodies.
I have. It was a news report from a reputable source. So I was just wondering if you had any information about that.
Dr. Rondo,
no.
Do you have any information on that question? Are you still on the call with us?
I can comment on that a little, guys. People who have immune disorders are never going to respond appropriately to vaccination of any sort. So we are not excluding any body in the population from vaccination. So you, of course, will have people that are not going to be able to respond appropriately immunologically to vaccination. So that's any vaccine, whether it's COVID or any other. You also have a hard time when you're vaccinating people. If you vaccinate them, for example, when we do research, we will give a placebo versus the drug that we give. And you'll find that 50% of the time, the placebo population will have a complication. So no matter what you give, you're going to have things that happen because it's life. People will die the same day they got their COVID vaccination. Doesn't mean it was from the COVID vaccination. You don't know that. There have been like 52 million vaccinations in this country. So of those 52 million people, how many of those are going to die in that time period anyway? It's very hard. There's a lot of confounding factors. Now, is there anything you take an aspirin? I tell people you take an aspirin, you can die. So do I believe that there have been some excess mortality secondary to COVID? Probably. People have had allergic responses. I give sometimes a Gardasil vaccine here, which is against HPV, and I've had to send young women to the hospital because they just responded immunologically unpredictably. So the issue is, does the benefit outweigh the risk? And that's what we decide when we cross the street. We take our kids to school every day. We could stay in our house and do nothing. Does the benefit outweigh the risk? That's our question. And with 600,000 people dead, our take as health providers for ourselves, which we've had the vaccine, and for our families who we've given the vaccine, as soon as the vaccine comes out, I'm going to vaccinate my 5-year-old granddaughter because I'm a true believer that the benefit outweighs the risk. And part of that, what's happening when people are not being vaccinated is they're allowing variants to develop. The more we allow variants to develop, the more we're putting our children at risk of getting those variants because our children are not able to be vaccinated as yet. So this is 600,000 people dead and more of blacks, browns, yellows. Only 20% of the Native population has been vaccinated. For example, we tried to get the head of the health services, Dr. Kuwasani, to come on because they are desperately trying to vaccinate that population. They're very underserved, even more than the Black and Hispanic population. So, they're dying at even a greater rate. It's always just common sense, a lot of this. So are we saying that it's 100%? No. I mean, the vaccines are 94 to 97% effective from preventing illness. That means 3 to 6% of people are going to get ill. Some portion of those people are going to die. It's just the nature of the beast. But it's a beast, and we have to fight with the tools that we have. And these are the tools that we have.
Thank you, Mahalia, for your questions. We really appreciate that.
We have Cal.
Yes, Cal is up next. Thank you, Cal, for joining us today.
How you doing? The question I had, I guess she somewhat answered it, but I happen to know 3 people that actually had the vaccine and still caught COVID, still had all the symptoms, still went through it just like anybody else did. So I was a little bit confused as to what, they're saying, oh, you take the vaccine, it's going to, decrease your chances of this and that, whatever. That's my whole, take on that, because I'm kind of confused as to how they're still getting COVID and they're saying, oh, no, get vaccinated, but you're still getting COVID. You're still passing it to other people. And obviously they didn't have it before they took it. They took it and still was able to get it. So, I mean, I don't really know, how that works. But that was a concern that I had.
Thank you. Will one of the doctors be able to address Cal's concern today?
So, Cal, are you wondering if you've had the vaccine, if you can still get COVID?
No, I know for sure you can. That's what I was asking. How is that happening?
Because the immune response is not enough to prevent you from becoming ill. Again, it's 94 to 97% effective. And if you choose to do Johnson & Johnson, it's less than that. It's more like 70% effective. So 30% of those people will still get the disease. And some proportion of those will get the disease to the point where it can threaten their life. So, it's just not 100%. Does that answer your question?
I guess, because, it's just so much going back and forth with the whole situation. Again, we will never truly understand how this really works, considering, we got so many different people that have so many different issues. This works for this person, that way it doesn't work for that person. If this person's immune system is compromised, if this, it's just so much. So it's kind of like, it's a lot for a lot of people to take in at times. Because, again, you think that you're doing the right thing, you get vaccinated or whatever, and then you still end up with it. Then you still spread it to your loved ones or whoever whatever the case may be. So it's kind of like, I guess you pretty much have to roll the dice with the situation in a sense.
You have to look at the pluses and minuses. I have people that I tell they cannot have the vaccine, to be honest, who really have some immunological disorders that are inappropriate for vaccination. So everyone must consult with their physician and see what their particular circumstance is. But that's rare.
Right.
There's always going to be outliers, but we have to go with what's good for the general population. And then you have to specifically address your own health issues. But in general, it is going to save lives the vast majority of the time. And so we're really talking about population issues here, not really specific issues.
Mm-hmm.
Because most of the people that are not getting vaccinated do not have this question. 99%. So that's what we can address today, to be honest.
Dr. Green, we're about to run out of time, but I've got two questions that I would love to ask you. And going back to what was said earlier about the virus being here to stay. Because tomorrow when I go on the radio, after having been on this Zoom, one of the things that I'm going to be sharing with my listeners is what I've learned today. If there is agreement that this virus is here to stay, and if it's here to stay, at some point, people who are not vaccinated, they run the risk of getting COVID and also spreading it. Would that be correct?
I think that is correct. The issue is that people who are having the vaccines are protecting their circle, but people who are not having the vaccine are allowing variants to develop. So very much our future is dependent on the success of roundtables and your communications on the radio and us as a community coming together to try to develop that herd immunity. If we don't develop that herd immunity, the COVID virus will be here much longer than if we did. We should be done. We should be through this. If we had a political party in office that acted more quickly, this whole process would be down to very minimal illness. And definitely we would not have had 600,000 people dead. And it's just sad that we have taken on the brunt of that, our communities. If this was just addressed more quickly, we would have had less likelihood of developing these variants.
Well, now we're finding that we're traveling. People are going to, I got to go on vacation. I got to leave the country. I'm really afraid that even if this thing spikes again here in our country, the people will never do what they did before in being, quote unquote, shut down as much as as they were in the past?
So, of course, we pray like smallpox and other diseases that we can eradicate it. But a lot of that is determined by our own actions.
Okay. Cheryl?
Like to just, those of you that have to go, we do try to keep a time schedule, but I do believe there are some questions that are specific to mental health and gynecology. And since we have a psychiatrist and OBGYNs on this call, if we can at least throw those questions out there. Those of you that have to leave us, thank you so much for joining us today. This is the first of many more to come. But those of you that can stay for the answers to these few questions, we would really appreciate your ear to this discussion, as it may help you as with your decision whether or not to get the vaccine, and also communicate with others. So that said, the first question is for Drs. McKenzie and Dr. Green. We have questions about fertility provided in the survey that we submitted. Would you be able to speak to fertility in terms of future ability to carry or carrying? If you can take that on for us, please.
So there is absolutely zero data, and we've done so many millions of vaccinations to think that the COVID vaccine impairs fertility. I am very happy when my patients come in pregnant and tell me they are vaccinated, because I am terrified of having a pregnant mother in the second trimester or third trimester get COVID, because her likelihood of dying from COVID is much higher than if she was non-pregnant. So the American College of OBGYN recommends that pregnant women are vaccinated for COVID. And we are quite hopeful, since, of course, we don't know the long-term damage. We don't have data, so we can't definitively say very much. We can definitively say that if you get COVID while you're pregnant, you're at a much higher risk of dying than someone who is not pregnant, and so therefore your fetus is at risk of dying. So that's what we know. And that's what we can go, that's the concrete evidence that we have. And after, we've only been vaccinating people for a year. So could we all grow two heads? Of course, we don't know, but do we have any evidence that that could happen? Zero evidence. So we can postulate many things. We can have fears about many things, but we cannot live fearfully. I think, James, I'm sure you have a scripture for this. Right? We cannot live fearfully. We must live faithfully, knowing that our God is able, and that He put us here to and gave us the wherewithal to survive. And when people say, why were the vaccines developed so quickly? My response is because all of the loopholes, all of the delays were opened. And usually there's just many, many delays through all these processes. We all know that. But if there's just a straight path with many more medicines, many more things that could help us as a people be able to get through the whole process much more quickly, of course. So again, common sense. When you open all the doors, all the gates, and people are allowed to work in an effective manner, you can get things done. And that's why it was developed quickly, not because we couldn't do it for other things. It's just it wasn't permitted to happen. So I'm sorry, Cheryl, what's your second question?
How does it affect fertility? I was asking, but I think you've basically answered.
Yeah, no evidence that it decreases women's ability to become pregnant. And there's really no reason it should. The virus does not go into the nucleus of cells, so it cannot change your DNA. It operates outside of the nucleus of cells, right? All of our DNA is protected inside of the nucleus. That's where all of our chromosomes, our babies, they separate, go back together. The virus does not operate there. I mean, the vaccine does not operate there. Sorry.
No, that's fine. Thank you so much for answering those questions. We have a couple of more. One is directed towards mental health. We had someone from the audience ask, is the U.S. or will the U.S. do anything, or what is the U.S. doing to combat the mental health issues as a result of COVID-19? If Dr. Dudley may be able to pick up this one for us.
Yes, thank you. So even before the COVID-19 pandemic, the U.S. mental health community was already putting steps in place to increase awareness of mental health illnesses across the board. And this is prior to the pandemic. And so even So, and then since then, being that we have been in the pandemic and there has been a lot of trauma and increase in depression and anxiety, they're just going full forward with those initiatives. So one that you probably heard about in the news was the mental health parity legislation, which is, a part of Obamacare, as far as making mental health on even ground with general health. So insurance companies would cover mental health services and substance abuse services like they would general health services. And as we know, they don't do general health services all that well as it is, so even more so for mental health. And now there is a major initiative to bring about awareness of mental illness, so making the community aware of the signs and symptoms of mental illnesses and resources. They are also are working towards making it more integrated into general health. And so as the other panelists who are doctors can state that now all specialties do screen for depression, and also about, just the access to mental health care in general, just general access to mental health care and especially in now since COVID, looking at the disparities in populations with people of color. So unfortunately, the mass shootings and things of that nature, the increases in suicide the mental health community had already revved up rollouts for mental health initiatives throughout the country prior to COVID, and this just gave it a boost.
Thank you, Dr. Dudley, for answering that question. I would like to address something that was brought up earlier, and we will bring this to a close within 10 minutes. So if we can be brief with our answers, and I'll be brief with my talking. There are a few questions that were directed to me personally, but may not have been asked on the survey. And I think if in the spirit of truth and transparency, as we mentioned before, those questions that people feel uncomfortable asking, and I think it was you, Dr. Dudley, that said, please ask those questions so that we have an opportunity to address them. The first being the microchip that people believe are being that are entering our system by way of the vaccine. Any of you physicians on the call, if you can address.
So I could just address the chips. Just understand that there have been hundreds of millions worldwide of the vaccine given throughout the world. There's no evidence that there are chips in the vaccine, scientific evidence. That's all I have to say.
There's some question I want to address about people saying that there's some electromagnetic as well. There's so many different, myths to debunk about this vaccine. So there's no electromagnetic anything also in the vaccine. People were saying they were magnetic after they got the vaccine. I don't know if you saw that, but there's no evidence for that as well.
I see we have one more hand up, Philip Howard, which is my brother-in-law. Thank you for joining us. If you would ask your question, and then we will get towards our close.
I have a quick question here because in Canada, what's happening, I don't know if it's happening in the States, but in Canada, what's happening is that there's mixing of vaccines. So for example, my son's first vaccine was Pfizer, but then he went back for the second vaccination and got Moderna. I've heard different things about the possible results of doing that, there's no difference. In other cases, I've heard that possibly it's actually even more effective that way. I just wondered what any of the doctors on the call might have to say.
Philip, as far as I know, that's not happening in the U.S., and I don't think anybody has a whole lot of data on that. So I think it will be developed probably in Canada, but here in the U.S., they do not mix the shots.
And I echo what she states. They make it very clear which shot, when you come in, which shot you received. And so when you come back, you receive the same shot. So with the Moderna and the Pfizer.
May I say something about that and try to answer that? This is Faye Howard speaking. Lots of Howards on. Faye Howard speaking.
Welcome, Mom.
Today, I was watching Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. I was watching the CBC and the health section from Quebec. And that question was specifically asked. Yesterday, I had my second shot and I got 2 Pfizer, and they assured me I was getting 2 Pfizers. So I was particularly interested in the question because it affected my grandson. And the doctor said, there's no problem having those. If you mix Pfizer and Moderna, the 2 mRNAs, there is no problem. They didn't say it makes the immunity more efficacious, but there's no problem. But the answer said, if you choose to wait until you can get the same thing, Pfizer and Pfizer, that's up to you. But there is no problem getting the Moderna having gotten the Pfizer before. So that's what I heard today from the doctor on TV.
I think that's correct, Mom. I don't think there would be a problem. We just don't know the immunity. We just don't, there's just no data as far as what's going to happen with the immunity. And I would kind of want to know that. I think they should figure that out to make sure it's not less immunity. You know, that would be a concern for me.
Yes, I agree. And as speaking to, as she was saying, being that they're both in, just from logically speaking, it would make sense they would both getting the mixing of the two would be as effective. But again, there hasn't been any studies that we've reviewed to speak on it. But logically speaking, it would be reasonable being that it's both mRNA.
Thank you both for contributing to that answer. James, I think we are coming to the time.
Well, first of all, to thank everybody. So, Cheryl, I'm so proud of you and all the people that are here. And since I was asked to give a scripture, I will. For the Spirit of God gives us, does not make us timid, but gives us power, love, and self-discipline. He gives us no fear. So, but thank you so much because you guys have given me something on which I can stand with my listeners. And by the way, that's 2 Timothy 1:7. But tomorrow I will be sharing some of the information that I heard here today. And I think that one of the things that's going to get people's attention is that virus is here to stay. Are you going to be vaccinated or are you going to roll the dice?
Amen. Thank you so much, James. Thank you to our esteemed audience. Thank you to our esteemed members of the medical community. Thank you for coming and sharing your questions and concerns. This is the first, but it is not the last of this roundtable. Dr. Dudley, Dr. Green, Dr. McKenzie, Dr. Rondon, we do welcome you back. Well, Linda is coordinating that effort. So thank you for your work in getting the team of physicians that are here today. And if we can ask that you continue working to bring physicians on for our next meeting. Thank you to the Ingenuity team, Kiana Simmons for managing the room for us today. I'd like to thank Dr. Logan for producing this effort as well. And as Tanya Edwards, who is co-producing the documentary. If you did receive a survey from us in the past or even up to this day, you may have gotten a question asking if you've had any experiences in your personal, directly or indirectly, that you've had with inequities in care. If you have, please make sure you let us know because we will be covering your stories. This is an integral part of our documentary, but the documentary is to really just bring light to the fact that we do experience healthcare inequities or disparities that we need to address. Because when we address them, we can acknowledge that they exist. We may just flip the script and change the approach, change the stories, and hopefully change the trajectory of our lives as people of color, Black, brown, and yellow people of color. So thank you again. I'd like to send a personal thank you to my husband, Adam Howard, and my mother, Lacey Hargrove, for believing in me along with my godfather, James, and just always supporting everything I do, finding doors where there don't seem to be one to ensure that this meeting was full. And we had an audience that was open and receptive to the information that we had to ask and share. This is not the end. I look forward to seeing you all at the next one. Thank you so much for being a part of this room. And Linda, if you'd like to close out with your physicians.
I was just going to say thank you for the participants, and we have many more. We have an amazing community of physicians of color in Broward County, Dade and Broward County. We have 2 Black physician organizations, and definitely we are here and open, and I think we are ready to do the work that is going to help the communities. Thank you.